I rejoice with those who said to me, "Let us go to the house of the Lord," dear Christian friends. I want to thank Pastor Dan for allowing me to jump into his sermon series here. I have a friend who, and today it doesn't have time for church. The members of Hope Lutheran, along with Pastor Dan, have been tackling some tough topics recently. Topics that are on our hearts because we care about the people that God has put into our lives. But we don't just care about people. You and I also care about the passages that God has given to us in His Word. And so you have been connecting the people with the passages and finding a way to use what's on your heart to serve others. And how awesome is that as we get going and into this week's message? I have a friend who, and I'm guessing you do too, who doesn't have time for church. I want to start by getting your reaction to a few statistics here this morning. The first stat I'm going to show you is from Barna Research, and it polled a whole bunch of Americans across cross-section of people, and it just divided the gap between church and unchurched people. And you can see up here on the screen that in general, in our world, 55% of people are church versus 45% unchurched. And of those 55% who would call themselves churched, only 31% of them would be practicing Christians. And what I mean by that is this: someone who goes to worship about twice a month or more and is engaged in some way, shape, or form with volunteering or something of that nature with church. So about 55% who call themselves church, 31% who are practicing. Does this maybe sound like somebody you know? Do you understand the difference? Do these stats shake out about right? I see some head shaking. Now I want to bring it a little bit closer to home. In the two church bodies that you and I are associated with, there have been some recent studies done. And I know you can't really quite see the percentages up there, but this is interesting. And I want to see if it tugs at your heartstrings as it did mine. We have about, for rounding numbers' sake, about 400,000 of us Lutherans, okay? And within the last year, we have 37.5% who have only gone to church 2 times. 37.5% of people have stepped foot in church on Christmas or Easter just within the last year. And then even more, take a look at what happens when you look at that 150,000 people who haven't gone to church more than twice in the last year. If we break it down even further, the stats are this: 18.6% of them, 75,000, haven't gone to church at all in the last year. These figures make my heart heavy because you and I have friends who don't go to church. This isn't a single person. This is a serious problem. This is a serious situation. And I suppose the next logical question is why? Why? Why do we have friends who don't go to church? Where are these people? What happened to the 150,000 individuals who are doing something else this morning? I suppose a number of reasons could be given. Perhaps it is individuals who have misplaced priorities, or the pressures of life are just weighing them down, or there is just some kind of personal issue. Maybe someone's not here this morning because they enjoy sleep. They value and they enjoy going to St. Mattress and hearing Pastor Pillow much more than they do stepping foot in Hope Lutheran. Or maybe they're just stuck in a rut. I don't know. Maybe people had a rough Saturday night and then couldn't get up quite on time this morning. Or maybe it's a situation where people's lives are busy. People are overworked, they're stretched, they're off balance, and then what happens is they use Sunday to play catch up. Maybe that's why the 150,000 are here. Maybe that's why you have friends who aren't in worship this morning. But maybe it's even a deeper spiritual issue. Have you thought of that? Maybe our friends who aren't here feel as if they've been wronged by the church. Maybe they feel that the church is full of hypocrites. You know some people like that. And maybe it's even a little bit deeper than that. Maybe they don't feel that the church of 2019 can relate to them. Or they don't feel a sense of belonging when they step foot in church. And maybe finally, it's certain sins, just guilt that weighs them down, and they feel unworthy to walk in a place of worship. Dear friends, it could be any one of those reasons or a combination of all of those about why people aren't worshiping on a Sunday and why we have friends who don't go to church. But before you and I sit in here this morning and shake our head in disgust or say, this is a sermon they really need to hear, I think you and I need to take a look at what God says in His Word and realize that just because you stand in a garage doesn't make you a good mechanic. Just because you sit in a church doesn't necessarily make you a stronger Christian. Because it says here in Isaiah, we all like sheep have gone astray. Each of us has turned to his own way, and the Lord has had to lay His iniquity on us all. So my question for you this morning is this. You might be here, but where is your heart? Where is your heart? Because those same individuals, our friends who aren't here, they're just like us, right? Standing before God, we are truly unworthy. There's a phrase that I often use, and it's this: there's a Pharisee inside of us all, right? There's a Pharisee inside of us all, and I think God could look at each one of us and say, you honor me with your lips, but your hearts are so far from me. You see, when God looks at our friends who are not here and He looks at the friends who are here, He doesn't see a difference, does He? God doesn't see a difference in the party habits of your friends versus the prideful heart that is within. Your God doesn't see a difference in the laziness of those who are not here with the lukewarmness of the people who are. God doesn't see a difference in the public sins of others and the private shame that we might feel. For all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. There is no difference. The friends who aren't here and maybe the friends who are, when it comes to, do we deserve to stand in the presence of God? So what's our next step? The next step is to repent. The next step is to remind ourselves of exactly why we're here. Asking God for forgiveness for the times when we have taken His holy, precious word for granted. For the times that we have devalued the means of grace. And remind ourselves again what it means to be in God's house. So why are you here? Why are you here this morning? You're here for your heart. You're here for your heart. You've heard the phrase before, home is where the heart is. Maybe some of you have a neat little, picture in your wall, a Pinteresty looking thing that says, home is where your heart is, or home is where you hang your heart. And isn't that so true? When I go home this afternoon, I'm not going to worry about being locked out or wonder if I'm welcome at home or think, is this a good time to just barge into my house? I'm just going to walk in cheerfully, confidently, and within about a split second, my kids are going to be, Daddy, 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 Daddy. And how cool is that? But there's times when I go home, too, where maybe I've had a bad day at school. Sometimes dealing with juniors in high school can be a bit challenging. I get to teach the juniors at St. Croix. Notice I said I get to, not I have to. And that's what church should be about, too. Church is a get to, not a have to. But they're a little rougher than others. And you know what? I get home, I'm like, I'm worn out. But I don't walk into my home thinking, is this where I'm going to find love or not? I walk in knowing that there is love. That there is a sense of belonging, that there is a welcoming person waiting for me or people waiting for me with open arms. Because that's where my heart is. My heart's at my home. Same way we can view church. Home is where your heart is. This isn't just Hope Lutheran Church. Isn't this God's house? And look what Jesus has done for you here as we just take a look at, remember what the passage from Hebrews 10 said, as we see what our God has done. Our God has not locked you out of this facility. God has not locked you out from His presence, has He? God says you're welcome here. In fact, you don't have to come in here tippy-toeing, wondering if you're going to disturb something. He says we have confidence to enter. We're here for our heart, and we're here because we have confidence in our heart, knowing that Jesus has done everything necessary for us. You see, God had you on His heart when He sent His only Son to tear down the wall, to tear down that curtain that was standing between us and Him. God had you on His heart. And so, your heart is home when you're here. Your heart is home when you're here. And no matter what you come in to this house of worship with, be it the baggage from work, being the struggles from your sinful self, being the whatever it might be, this is home because Jesus has your heart. And he made sure of that. And so we see what it says at the end of this section. It says that how we can come in, it's all about our heart. With a sincere heart, with the full assurance that faith brings, because our hearts have been sprinkled to cleanse us from a guilty conscience and having our bodies washed with pure water. So why are you here? You're here because of your heart and because of the heart of God who brought you here and bought you with his blood and has brought you into God's family. I shared the story of Bruno before. He's here for his heart. He wouldn't want to be anywhere else. And now I know there are some of your friends who would say, if I step foot in that church, the walls are going to fall down. You've probably had someone to share that with you. Maybe it's Uncle Charlie or somebody at work that's just sort of an old curmudgeon that is making a million excuses of why not to come to church. And they just feel like they don't deserve to be there. The walls are going to come down if I step foot in that church. Well, guess what? I've never seen a church fall down. I've never seen a wall come crumbling down when somebody's walked in. It doesn't fall down when I walk in, and I'm a sinner just like the rest of you. And just like the rest of my friends. So if people believe that the walls are going to fall down, we must tell them why we're here. That Jesus has torn down that wall between us and him. He tore that curtain down from the cross when he said, it is finished. And when I come, God gives me a clean conscience. And he reminds me of his baptism. He tells me exactly where I stand with him. So that's why you're here, isn't it? Isn't that why you're here this morning? You're here for your heart. Because God had you in his first. So what's next? There's room for more. I got a whole front pew, a whole front row of chairs right here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's room for more. So what do? We have those people on our heart. I have a friend who isn't here. So where can you and I start? Well, let me share that with you based on what it says in Hebrews chapter 10 here. And thinking about this, I want to remind you that each person in everybody's story is a little bit different, is a little bit unique, isn't it? And let's not just see our friends who aren't here as a statistic. Now, I understand I share with you some statistics at the beginning, 150,000 or 45% who are unchurched. I did those to give you the big picture. And now let's bring it down to the micro level a little bit. Let's bring it down to the chair that's next to you that might be empty. And see that person as a soul who is dearly loved by God. And as a soul who certainly needs your love as well. And can I ask you, who might be on your heart right now? Thinking about that empty chair or that empty row. Who is on your heart? Which friend, which family member, which sibling, which son, which daughter, which coworker, which schoolmate, which teammate, which neighbor is on your heart who is not here right now? Because we all have friends. Studies show 45% of your friends are unchurched people. Who are you thinking of? Who are you thinking of? They're your friends, aren't they? But even better, God's word says Jesus is their friend. The Bible's very clear about that, isn't it? Jesus is a friend of sinners. He's torn down that wall, and he's brought us into his family. You see, so many of our friends see church as rules. But it's about a relationship. It's not about rules. It's about a relationship. The relationship that Jesus had and has with you because he had you on your heart. So the question now is this. We have friends who aren't here. Now what? Do we just say, all right, the Craylers were great today. I love the fellowship. Let's go watch football. Absolutely not. We have to have a strategy. We have to have these friends on our hearts. We get to have these friends on our hearts. I'm going to share with you this quick phrase that we used at my former church. Seth, can we put it on the screen? It was just simply this. Invest, invite, evangelize. And there's many takes on this through churches that have an evangelism program, but this is the phrase we use. Invest, invite, evangelize. And I want to walk you through this here briefly, and maybe, just maybe, this phrase or something I say will motivate you, spur you on, encourage you to invite your friends to come to Hope next week or whatever church you belong to. Okay? Invest, invite, evangelize. Invest, invite, evangelize. So sort of catchy. Not quite all alliteration, but we're sort of there. Okay? First thing to do is invest. Okay? We'll go to that first one. Invest in people. When I think of investing, I don't first think of Warren Buffett. I think of the Apostle Paul. Why do I think of the Apostle Paul? If you read his work in letters to the people of Philippi and Ephesus, and then as you think about how he responded to going into the city of Athens, man, was Paul good at investing in people, wasn't he? Do we think about that? Do we think about being like Paul and investing in people? He learned about their lives, and he studied their culture, and he figured out a way to connect the dots from point A to point B to get to the ultimate goal. He listened, and he learned, and he loved them. And if you read especially Ephesians and Philippians, you can see how he was so involved that when he left those people, he started crying and they started crying because there was this invested relationship. There was this caring environment. I believe you and I are going to be in places a lot longer than the Apostle Paul ever stayed. So my question is this: how are you investing in the people that God has surrounded you with? If you're a dorm student, how are you investing in the people on your wing? If you live in a cul-de-sac like I do, how are you investing in those 10 other families that are there? If you're on an office floor, how are you investing in the people that you work with, especially the unchurched, the 45% who don't know Jesus? How are you investing in the people of Farmington, if this is your community? And God doesn't necessarily promise that it's going to be an overnight return. He does tell you His word does not return empty. And when we listen and when we learn, and then we can leverage something about that relationship, we can spur one another on toward love and good deeds. So the first step towards talking to our friends and thinking about why they're not here and how to maybe get them here by the grace of God is invest in them. And the next one is to invite. So we invest, and then this comes the time to invite. Is that scary, to invite someone to church? I see some heads shaking. We sort of talked about it this morning at our Bible study. Like, sometimes it can be hard to invite someone to church. Why is it hard to invite someone to church? What's the worst they can say is no. Okay, I've been rejected before. But that's really what it is. We have this inner sense of I fear being rejected, or maybe I don't know what to say, or I don't know, it just feels awkward. Because what if they do say no? Then our relationship's always going to be a little awkward. Let me tell you this. Those who are members here at Hope are just everyday folks. You have a great opportunity presented to you. You have an obligation. You have a sense of urgency there as well in your inviting because the day is approaching. We know what that says there in Hebrews. All the more the day is approaching because people have developed some bad habits. And the Lord's going to come back. So we will want to invite, encourage until Jesus comes back. Well, what does that look like? I was really fired up. I live in Inver Grove off of Highway 52 and the 80th Street exit. And a new restaurant opened up right in our little neighborhood there. People often call that little spot of Inver Grove the Bermuda Triangle because everything that used to come in there, the businesses never stayed open. But guess what just opened up? Inver Grove Brewing. And it is a great addition to the neighborhood. Okay? And my neighbor, John, was there within the first 30 minutes of that place being open. But here's the thing when it comes to inviting. If the owner of Inver Grove Brewing came to me and said, hey, Dustin, you should really come and check out my restaurant. It's great. Fantastic atmosphere, good food, all of that. I would consider going, hey, thanks for reaching out. But if my neighbor John and Sarah come over and say, hey, Dustin and Katie, why don't you come with us to Inver Grove Brewing? Let me tell you, it's great. We were there for the first meal. The atmosphere is great. The food's wonderful. You want to come with us this afternoon? You know what? I'm getting a babysitter like that, and we're going with John and Sarah. If Pastor Dan invites somebody to Hope Lutheran, they're going to figure that that's his job, right? That's sort of the gig that he's been given. But if one of the members of Hope Lutheran decides to invite their neighbor, their friend, their coworker, their son, their daughter, it means a lot more. There's a 20% chance they're going to come if Pastor Dan says, come on to check him out at my church. And he's a pretty friendly guy. But if you, as a friend, invite your friends, I think the studies say that 70 or 80% chance to do that. How awesome is that? Right? And God gives you the strength to do that. Maybe it's just being like Andrew was to Peter, and arranging that you bring that person along to see Jesus. Or think of Philip to Nathanael. He didn't give a great testimony. He just said, come and see. Just come and see what the series at Hope is all about. Come and check out our Thanksgiving worship. Come and be there for Christmas for kids. Or come and see. Just come and see. We invest. We invite. And finally, we do the one thing that God has called us to do. We evangelize. we evangelize. And we see that in that last verse there. Let us hold unswervingly to the hope we profess. We don't keep this good news to ourselves. We send it out. That's a beautiful word there, that we profess this hope, that gospel message that's there. It's euangelion. I teach where's Ella? You in here, Ella? She's somewhere. She's a host, but there you are. Yeah, do you remember what that word means, Ella? Yeah, it means good news, right? Oi! It sounds like a German lifting a stein. Oi! Angelion. That's the good news of Jesus. It's not euangelion. It's euangelion. It's good news of what Jesus has done for you. He has knocked down that wall. He has given you access to God. And He has brought into your life this confidence and this joy, this peace and this purpose. Friends, we have friends who have developed some bad habits. We have friends who don't have hope. We have friends who haven't met our faithful Father. And we have that message. We have it on our hearts because Jesus had you and me on His heart first. And isn't that not a message that we should get out there? 100%. Absolutely. And God is the one that empowers us to do such as that. Because He promised that He's faithful. And when His word goes out, when you invest, and when we invite, and when we together evangelize, sharing our stories, and God never says you have to have a script or quote Scripture word for word. He just says, let your life be a light for Jesus and share what His love has meant to you and how your heart has been changed. God's faithfulness will make sure that His word never returns empty. So let's not think about 150,000. Let's think about one. Just one. Between now and Christmas. It's on your heart. Because that's another reason people don't invite people to church. They've never been challenged to do that. They've never thought about it. It's on your heart. Between now and Christmas, each one of us here, how powerful would this be? We have friends who don't come to church. How powerful would it be? What would Pastor Dan, what would Hope Lutheran's Christmas service look like if one person was invited by each of you? His word doesn't return empty. His word doesn't return empty. So let's invest, let's evangelize, all to the glory of God. Amen.